FDAC. As you saw, I think, okay. As you saw, I think it was you and maybe 2 other members came to a couple of the meetings. You, I believe, were at all of them, Margaret, but those meetings weren't intended to inform the FDAC. They were intended to inform staff and our architects. So it doesn't, the fact that, let me put that differently. We're using that information, whether it's a discussion item or not. However, to your point, it is important to update the whole committee on those. So we'll be doing that as part of our next meeting, which will be focused on the elementary and middle school projects that were discussed during those meetings. Today isn't that. Today was updates that project updates that we didn't get to the last 2 meetings that we had. But again, I think you've raised a very good point. This is an appropriate time to add the subcommittee updates, and that one will be a regular item going forward.
Okay.
Does that make sense? In other words, we're going to do that.
It does make sense, but I think maybe I had a misunderstanding. I don't know if any of the other members of the FDAC had a misunderstanding, but I specifically remember, I did not go back on the recording, and I'll perhaps need to do that. I specifically remember that discussion when we would initially identified March 14th as the next date for our meeting, as it was even noted in the agenda, that there was some comment about, yes, we can then review, this would be after the community meetings and we can have a discussion about it. So if it's my misunderstanding, I apologize, but I do think that there needs to be some commitment from the team to sort of digest what we learned during those meetings. And they were very well organized. I thought they were really excellent. This is not the time for that discussion. We're discussing a motion for the approval of the agenda, but I just wanted to underscore that issue and raise the question.
Later in this meeting, we'll propose a meeting for April 18th for us to spend and really go deep on a lot of the things around the elementary and middle school, Santa Monica elementary and middle school projects. So I really feel like we feel like we need to digest that a little more and do a little more work with it to bring it back to you. And that'll also be before the Lincoln and Roosevelt meetings, which happen on the 25th and the 26th.
Any further discussion on the acceptance of the agenda as modified?
Okay.
John, you may need a roll call vote on this.
Margaret, did you have anything?
Roll call vote on this.
No, I'm just raising my hand to accept.
Okay, so since there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as modified? Okay, we need a 2/3. It looks like we're good. I can't see you, Amy, but and Sam, I can't see you. Okay, Amy's good. Sam, are you good?
I missed what was added, so I'm abstaining.
Oh, it's just the subcommittee report.
Okay, but I'll abstain because I wasn't here for it to be
We
made.
still passed by 2/3, so the agenda as amended has been accepted. All right, now we'll go to the approval of the meeting minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes from February 7th and February 15th. Should we take those one at a time, or can we accept them together? Does anyone have any comments or questions on the minutes? Margaret?
Oh, it's really more just typos on the second, on the 3rd page of the February 7th meeting, item 7, there are statements like presented, just to change, except for the first one where Carrie introduced Jim Favaro to present. But then we got into presented. So each of the teams presented, it wasn't 2%. It's just a typo, kind of editorial comment. That's my comment on that one. Let's take them separately.
Okay. Any other comments on the February 7th meeting minutes? I don't see any. Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the February 7th meeting minutes with the correction that Margaret noted. Margaret seconded. Okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes? Okay, the minutes, February 7th minutes pass. Let's move on to the February 15th minutes. Any comments or questions regarding the February 15th minutes? Margaret?
I'm just wondering if, because there was a comment in a couple places about the creation of the ad hoc design review subcommittee. Do we call it is ad hoc? Is that the appropriate name, or are we just talking about a subcommittee? I don't know technically what is the best way of describing it. And is it important to identify who's the members of that committee?
Steve, any comments on that?
I don't know whether we
You can call it.
differentiated. I mean, to me, ad hoc is not so much of a title as it is a representation that it is a committee we're putting together for this particular process and time, as opposed to a longer term standing committee. So I do see it as, a design review committee as sort of the title, and its status is ad hoc. Unless the group
that's
as a
right.
group wants to create a standing committee, then I think we should agendize that and do that as an
Yeah.
agenda item.
So that makes sense. Do we want to name the members? I think the members should be identified in the minutes.
Did
That
we
would be
name them
helpful.
in the actual meeting, or we just said that we would talk about it and we would invite them after? I think that's what we did, Steve.
I think there were three members who volunteered.
That's true. Oh, that's true.
So
Yeah, so maybe add the names to the minutes with
Mhm.
regards to the subcommittee.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I had just one other comment on the motion on page, I guess it's page 3 of the minutes. The motion of the FDAC recommends moving forward to the next phases of design on McKinley and Rogers, subject to a review of the campus master plans, just to add the word master.
All right. Any other comments on the February 15th minutes?
Had a question. We not summarize public comments in these minutes? Because they are part of the record of the meeting.
They're
And then-
also available online on the videos.
Yeah, we maintain a recording of those public comments, but we do not summarize them.
Is
That
there a
is
reason?
That's a typical district process.
Is
We've
there a
not in the
reason?
past. We've not in the past.
Well, but is there a reason why they're not? Because they're part of the record, just as important as which committee members voted, which I see we're now itemizing at this point as opposed to counts.
The district as a standard does not detail public comment.
Is there a place where that standard exists? And also, is there a standard by which we're now publicizing individual votes?
Yeah, that standard is the standard that is followed by the Board of Education. And so in the minutes that are prepared for the Board of Education, they do list who voted and how they voted, but they also do not detail public comment.
Okay, and where's the policy of the board? Is that listed on their website so we can
I'm
review
not
that?
sure that's a written policy or whether it's a process and a procedure,
Carrie, hold on.
but it is a
Sam,
procedure.
The past practice.
I'm sorry, what? There are
we're
multiple people
following the
talking.
district board. Sam, what he's saying is not that there's a standing policy, like a written policy. He's saying we're following the board practices.
Okay, because the listing of our votes is a change in our practice after multiple years on the committee. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I think where I've seen that before is when we've had a roll call vote for some reason. But again, I think what we're trying to do is reflect the way that the board does their.
Brown Act committees are required to list the votes. That's it for the last, I don't know, year or 2 or 3, fairly recent.
All right, thank you.
So we may have lagged behind when we were supposed to implement that.
Yeah, to that point, the last name of one of the public comments, Kat Blandino, was omitted from the minutes. It says
Okay.
public comments, Wendy Dembo, Kat, and Nikki Koloff. So you might as well give.
Yeah, we should add that. Okay, can I make a motion that we accept the minutes as amended? for the February 15th, 2022 meeting? Any other comments?
No, I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. On to staff reports. I have none. Okay, go into project updates and discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you. So really, we're going to start off with Kevin, who's going to walk us through the first couple. Carrie, you may have some COVID-19 updates as well, because I think there are some things that, although it's not like the committee needs to know this for any action or anything, I believe we have made some changes as far as masking and so forth. And Carrie, would you mind updating those for district projects as well as schools? And then we can have Kevin walk through the rest of our updates there.
Oh,
Or
certainly.
A&E.
So just as a general report, as the COVID numbers have gotten better, and hopefully they continue to improve and do not slip back, we have been off-ramping our response to this in many ways. The Department of Health has changed their protocols for schools and sort of loosened a lot of the requirements, shifting those from required to must consider or should consider. And so we have adapted and adjusted those. So on the things like food and feeding schedules and how we're doing feeding, distancing, mask use, and cleaning protocols, we have been relaxing those back to the old normal to get those to occur. Though we are still maintaining all of our ventilation systems up to the code, and while that is shifted to a recommendation as opposed to a requirement, we are making sure we are maintaining all of our ventilation processes that we put in place. And Kevin, do you have anything you want to add to that?
You know, there's not a lot of change. There's not a lot of update in that regard. We've talked through the changes we made to our central ventilation systems and the supplemental things we did. And there hasn't really been any change. We're just maintaining those standards, as you already said.
Mm-hmm.
What about on construction sites?
So on construction sites, we are following the same recommendations that we have been following on campuses, where a couple of weeks ago, when masks were required outdoors, I guess it was more than a couple of weeks, but when masks were required outdoors, our teams were required to wear them. I will say that was one of the harder things for our crews, and we constantly had to remind them to put them on. But that was our standard. When the standard changed and they were required indoors only, that was our standard, and now it's optional. So if you'd like, I'll move on to, I'll go quickly through some project updates.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so at Rogers, our HVAC work is complete, and we'll be filing our NOC very soon. We do have a follow-up project, as we've talked about in this meeting, which is a facade installation to sort of conceal or to reduce the impact of the mechanical equipment that was installed on the roof. And we expect an NTP probably this week to begin that project. At Roosevelt, we are substantially complete, and we're working with the architect on a punch list. It'll be issued very soon. There is some work remaining that will be done outside the contract by purchase order. There's some, realignment of some fencing and some recreation of a garden area that was sort of impacted by some mechanical units. And then there's a tough shed that's going to be installed to accommodate some storage that was impacted by some mechanical installations. At Grant, our base HVAC scope is complete. There were some additional rooms added that were not covered by the additional scope, but they were sort of requested by staff during construction, and we were able to accommodate that. That work is about 95% complete. Again, as we've talked about before, the door design, the Salto lock design was impacted last summer by some design challenges and some supply chain challenges. And so that work has moved to next summer. So we are preparing for that right now, along with some other associated change order work that has been going on continuously right now. At Lincoln, we are completing work, test and balance in 6 buildings over spring break. That will cover most of the classroom buildings. There is ongoing work in the theater and the cafeteria, and that will follow later. There's also some ongoing work in the classrooms in the library building, the newest building that was installed, I guess, about 10 years ago now. And that work is, all of the work at Lincoln is expected to be substantially complete before the end of this school year, which is ahead of schedule. We had originally contracted for that work to be, I think, complete, in September of this year, but they were able to accelerate some of that work, and they're on track to finish this school year. We have had some challenges at Lincoln with some roofing leaks. Today, we had some challenges. I spent a lot of time out there today where they have various mechanical work that's caused some roofing work to be in various stages of completion. They had a lot of temporary roofing installed that their temporary patching did not work very well. And so I spent a lot of time out there today, assessing the issues and just coming up with some ways to protect the classrooms, because we knew there was another storm coming this afternoon. At Smash Mirror, we are expecting to reach substantial completion at the end of spring break. The work that's happening right now, or the work that remains, it's fire alarm work, it's some mechanical work that was, these things were impacted earlier because we couldn't get certain materials on time. And so they have at this point pushed that work out to be completed over spring break. Some of it is like going to heavily impact some classroom areas and really couldn't be done while school was in session. That's actually the end of our, I do want to touch on one more thing. That's some work at Smash Mirror to investigate the ongoing, decades long waterproofing challenges at that campus. This from the investigation that I've done, this waterproofing challenge dates back to either the initial construction or shortly thereafter, the initial construction of that campus. And it has never been completely resolved. And we have, quite honestly, we have done a lot of incremental things to address this issue, and it just has been a challenge. And in order to really consider what the next steps should be, we've hired a waterproofing consultant. They are going to come in next week during spring break. They're going to spend 2 days on site investigating whatever. They're going to investigate the building. They've been looking at as-builts. They've been talking to different people, about different staff, about what their experience has been. And we're going to have people on site that are prepared to, they may say, well, we expect that they're going to say, we would like you to open that wall so we can see what's happening inside. Whatever destructive investigation they deem necessary, will be ready to perform. And that'll happen during week 1 of spring break, and we'll have the rest of the time to patch everything back before school starts again. So that's kind of the last item in that update.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Okay, Cherie, let's talk about FF&E updates.
Okay, Kevin, did I just miss it, or did you also talk about Grant and what we have going this summer there?
I did. I touched on it, but just the door work and the Salto work. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did mention that work was impacted last summer and that it would be moved to this coming summer.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Carrie. Cherie?
Great. Hi. Thank you. Thank you all. So on FF&E, I'm going to focus specifically on Santa Monica projects. And we have a project known as the district-wide FF&E project. Right now, the last site is Smashmere to receive the new classroom furniture. Due to delays with manufacturing, the site has agreed to have the new FF&E installed this coming summer instead of spring break. Installation of the new furniture is planned to commence on June 27th, with completion planned by July 21st. The overall project is under budget, and the district is looking to provide some additional FF&E with the remaining available funds, such as items as updating some cafeteria seating, depending on available funding and proposed costs, as well as upgrading some of the music classroom furniture. And again, that's for the district-wide FF&E project. Samohi Exploration and Gym Project. The FF&E programming and planning is currently in progress, and that is being done with the architect of record and the site committees that have been assigned. Planned installation will align with the project's substantial completion date per the project's construction schedule. So we're still in planning and targeting. The next step would be procurement. And that's all I have for Santa Monica FF&E update. Are there any questions? Great. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you. So I probably could have organized these differently so Kevin could have talked straight through, but it was probably nice to get a good break. So
It's nice to have a breather.
so we'll go back to Kevin for oh, Margaret, I'm sorry, what was that?
I just had a question for Sherry. Just from my understanding, the funding for these FF&E projects is bond related or part of the?
All of this is bond related, yes.
Okay.
So the projects she was talking about were funded by Measure SMS.
Measure ES or SMS?
Well, I suppose Discovery was ES, but the others, if I'm not mistaken, are all SMS.
Yeah, they are all SMS and M for the Malibu projects. And I have to say that the 21st Century Furniture Project, I think, is one of our most exciting, though not our most expensive project. It's a $9 million project, essentially, but it means that every student throughout their entire day has new classroom furniture that is flexible and movable and allows for a lot of other adaptation. So for a small project, it has a really big bang for its buck that I really appreciate, and it's made a big difference in the classrooms. So it's exciting. It's been exciting, and talking to the teachers, they really have appreciated that project.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Sheree. Okay, we're going to jump back to Kevin, who's going to talk to us about our safety and security projects update.
All right, thanks, Steve. So in the scope of this update, the safety and security is referring to the installation of new PA clock systems and a new intrusion alarm. And just for some background, those systems were, with the existing systems, were kind of antiquated copper wire systems that just really could not be maintained anymore. And so we are replacing them with, IP-based, modern, digital systems. And so for PA, and this kind of excludes Samohi, and I would rather, if we want to get into Samohi, I'd rather let Alan talk about that, because he can, he's much better at going building by building over there. But outside of Samohi, we have both systems installed. Actually, the intrusion alarm is scheduled to be completed over spring break. There were some outstanding components that we needed, and so we have PA installed, and the staff is trained, it's up and running, and the intrusion alarm will be completed over spring break. The PA system was contracted for at 5 other schools so far. The installation is complete at Franklin and Grant, and we're just, this week, and right out. So this week we have training at Franklin, and right after spring break, we have training at Grant. And then the next 3 schools where we have contracted for new PA and clock systems. This also includes the bell systems. is at McKinley and, well, actually, sorry, the other two are two schools in Malibu. So it's Webster and Malibu, but that's not really the scope of this meeting. And then the next three schools for PA Clock will be Smashmere, Roosevelt, and Lincoln. I have some budget concerns on these, so I have, not put this on the agenda for the board. I'd like to get this resolved in the next day or so, we can make a final decision on getting those three on the board agenda for the meeting on, I forget which date it is, but the deadline is like Wednesday. And that would include
April 22nd.
Okay, thank you. So that would include PA systems at those three schools and intrusion alarm at Smashmere. Like again, the initial budget just came in, quite a bit higher than we expected for those three campuses. So we've gone back and we've done value engineering on those two designs. And I got to present those back to Steve and hopefully Carrie, if I can get them. I know he's got a busy week this week, but so we can get a final go ahead to get those agenda items completed. And then we will continue on with, well, so the plan has always been to install PA Clock, and then the other schools would be Will Rogers, Olympic, Edison, and Edison. We've had a lot of concerns lately about intrusion alarm, and so we have kind of layered that on as another system that would be good to install side by side with these low voltage systems. But we're just kind of getting a feel for the cost of those systems, and I gotta again do some budget checks and make sure that we're on track to complete all these schools. But I think it's highly likely that we will do Smashmere because we've had so many problems there with vandalism, break-ins, and vandalism.
Thank you, Kevin.
And we did just mention cameras. They're done, but I don't think we've ever said done to this.
Yes, that is true. And I actually I did have an update from Kay about the camera work being complete. I mean, there's like a little bit of troubleshooting going on here and there, but the cameras are done. I didn't sort of work that in the scope of this update, but that is true.
Thank you.
Great. So
looks like Thomas has a question.
Oh, just a quick question, Kevin. Thank you for the end part of your presentation when you said Smashmere, given its repeated break-ins.
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, did the district do threat assessments for each each campus, or you might want different things for different places depending on the risk profile?
Yeah. So I don't know that it was a formal threat assessment, but I did sit down with M&O and with Carrie, and they gave me a hit list of an order. Probably shouldn't call it a hit list, but they gave me a list, an order, a priority list for campuses. I know that I don't have it in front of me, but I know that Will Rogers was another one high on that list. And I believe the middle school, well, no, we have jams. So I think Lincoln was another one high on that list. But I mean, I don't know how formal of an assessment you're asking about, but that's what it was. It was just talking to staff.
Okay. I guess I brought it up before, but I'll bring it up again. Given that Santa Monica is the headquarters of RAND, that is probably one of the global leading national security organizations. It might be smart. They have an education policy division too, to talk about that issue, because it costs a lot of money to fix things after these break-ins, and what's that old saying? Good fences make good neighbors. So just something to think about.
Thanks, Thomas.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Thomas, and thanks, Kevin. So, Alan, we're going to roll into the Samohi update, but while we're under safety and security projects, Kevin kind of referenced that you'd probably be the best to give us updates on that. So before we move on to item E, Alan, are you able to provide any updates on the safety and security projects at Samohi?
Sure. When it comes to things like cameras, we put cameras, we had these perimeter cameras that we installed onto the campus a couple of years ago. So we have I don't know how many of the cameras we have in total, but my guess is somewhere around about 16 cameras that just monitor the perimeter of the campus. And then with the Discovery building, obviously with subterranean parking and things, security is more of an issue down places like that. We've got these a lot of breakout spaces in the common areas and things. So we've got some cameras that monitor that kind of thing. So from a camera perspective, we've got them all over the place, and they are all centrally monitored, or not centrally monitored. They are monitorable and recorded. There's some recording that continues. So that's fully operational. From a intrusion alarm point of view, we've installed an intrusion alarm system in Discovery, and it's 100% complete, but not hooked up into a reporting system. And we're actually going through the process right now, trying to find, in soliciting some bids from 3 different monitoring companies. And the idea is to actually get this monitoring done, first of all, for Discovery, and then we'll expand it to the rest of the campus. And then I assume that it's going to be one that's going to be not district-wide, but Santa Monica-wide. And the system we have is actually works through the cameras as well. So if you have a break-in in a specific area, the cameras in that area will actually focus on that area. So the monitoring company is not just kind of looking at a break-in blind and without being able to see things. And if that activity goes elsewhere on the campus, it follows that general area. We obviously don't have cameras that see all the, every entrance to every room or anything like that, but there are those abilities that are going to be built into this monitoring, and we're in the process of that right now, setting that up. Great. Anything else on that?
I want to say one other thing about SAML High security, and that is not so much for this committee, but just so you understand, there is a more personnel security concern in there, and we are preparing to do a study to look at our campus security and how they are interacting with the new building and the new structure, and whether or not we have the appropriate number of security, and whether or not their policies and procedures are being followed correctly, or whether we need to make changes to that. So that's also something that's in process.
That's good. Yeah, apparently there's been a tremendous amount of destruction and graffiti in the new building, which is extremely disappointing. Custodians tell me it's pretty bad. Can we put up more deterrent type things? I mean, I know there's some discussion about what we can and cannot monitor, and people have different opinions on that, but it's so sad.
It is sad. I'm not sure I would characterize it as pretty bad. It is sort of the level of graffiti and normal vandalism that we see throughout our campuses. So it's sad that it's in a new building. It's like you would think
it feels
new building.
right. It feels worse because it's such an incredible facility. I think you're probably right.
But the amount is not. But so far the board has directed, as far as cameras, and is that they are really there for more perimeter and not for behavioral. They're not really there to stop students from doing bad things. We'd have to readdress that with the board, because they gave very clear direction on that.
I remember that. That's true.
All right, sure.
Sorry about that. Sorry. Why don't we go ahead, Alan, with the updates on Discovery, and then we can move right into exploration.
Okay, so Discovery was, I think everybody understands or knows that it was completed in August last year, and has been occupied ever since then. With the supply chain issues we had towards the end of COVID, we had a lot of issues in trying to complete everything on time. We obviously got the building completed and signed off, DSA signed off, and everything else in terms of the inspection and safety and all the other issues that had to be signed off, so we could occupy the building. But there was still a lot of finishing off things that had to happen, and obviously it creates a problem in trying to work when school's in session. So we've had to work night shifts, starting work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and going through until midnight, or whatever it takes, weekends and things like that. So it's been a bit of a challenge trying to get these things done, and everything is coming to a conclusion right now. There are a couple of major, more significant issues than others. Hvac has been one that's been a challenge for us. We've been working through it. We're getting a whole lot closer now. We had a pretty intense meeting this morning talking the whole thing through. And we are going to be in a position next week when school's out to be able to work through from floor to floor. You know, there are two buildings effectively. It's a north and south building, and we're going to work through building by building and floor by floor to kind of work out and troubleshoot all these things. You know, some of the issues in that building, the fact that we've got this underfloor air supply and heating systems and things like that, to be able to get into checking out each of the individual devices, you have to pull up sections of the floor. So it's been a challenge trying to get these things sorted out while the school is occupied. And this is why we think that these coming 2 weeks, we should be able to nail everything down, and hopeful that by the time the students get back after the spring break, we should be up and running with a, let's say, a trouble-free system. We've got some little minor sort of low voltage type of things like the AV systems, where we also had some supply chain issues there. Busy working through those, and those should be done in the next couple of weeks. Olympic Gate is another one that a lot of people see. Olympic Gate is now complete. You can't drive up to it and open it because the existing gate creates a problem because it's a metal gate, and when you open the gate, it triggers a loop and it opens. You know, so we've got some issues which we can only deal with during the spring break. So next week we're going to take care of all of those issues, and we're going to have an automated gate there, which will make life a whole lot easier. Another one is the pool bulkhead. We've had some issues with pool bulkhead. We've got a high-level meeting scheduled for later on this week, and we'll come up with some solutions and resolve the issue by the time school comes back. Let's see what else there is. Oh, photovoltaics, the PV system. SCE has dragged its heels on giving us the final buy-off and connecting into the system. We've actually been complete for months now. And SCE has just been kind of dragging on and on and on, but it looks as though the final issues are going to be resolved this week. So with a bit of luck, we'd be hooked up and generating power. And then we're just working through the final, you know, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but we are just about there. And then, of course, the project was accepted by the board on last Tuesday. So that's it for Discovery. Anyone has any questions on Discovery?
Margaret has her hand up.
I do. It's Discovery, but it also relates to future projects that are now in design development and other stages. But is there anything that we've learned from the Discovery building that could be applied to the projects that are in design development right now? For instance, what you state about the floor and the HVAC system, and that it's, you know, the flexibility of the building requires that this infrastructure be embedded in the floor, but on the other hand, you're getting, you know, the issues of needing to pull up floor to repair or revise those systems. So I'm just wondering, that's one that stood out for me, and I don't know what is being envisioned for the projects that are now in design development. But Carrie and Steve, and I mean, this is really a question of how we can learn from issues that are coming up now or have come up in our various projects that are completing.
Can I just quickly address that before you jump in there, Steve? Just one of the things we did, I mean, there are obviously a lot of lessons to be learned, too many to mention, but it's just a whole bunch of different things. Communication is obviously one of the things that's always an issue, trying to communicate between us as a district with the construction team, the architects, the construction management, and getting all that communication and things taken care of. So what we did is we actually had a meeting where all of the parties, you know, every one of the team members, we spent a whole day. This was about 3 weeks ago, downtown in McCarthy's office. there must have been 20 or 30 of us in there, and we kind of hammered through all of the issues, laid everything on the table and kind of addressed how we're going to deal with bottlenecks and how we're going to deal with all sorts of different issues. So we certainly are very cognizant of that and have taken steps to be able to address it. Steve, Terry?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think, Margaret's question might have been more about design elements of the bill. My answer is maybe not exactly what Margaret's question was about. Because I think, Margaret, I heard you asking about, are there design elements that we wouldn't do again?
Both, but yeah, design elements, particularly Alan, just helpfully some of the others, but
yeah, I mean, and it's, some of these things are a trade-off. So we have always known that going with effectively a giant plenum below the floor as the air conditioning system has some complexities. And those are complexities the district was willing to accept because of the increased flexibility in the building. So, obviously there's never a perfect design. I mean, it may be perfect for one thing and drastically imperfect for another. So I think we found that there are a number of areas like that where we may look at this next time and say, okay, the flexibility is great. It might not be worth the trade-off. In past projects, we've had some things that we've encountered that were maybe a little too, Carrie likes to call them bleeding edge. So when we've really been seeking the highest level of sustainability we could get, we were doing things like putting in solar chimneys at Edison. Now, that was years ago, but I'm using as an example of something that for us in that environment did not work. And the passive cooling that was supposed to take effect from those solar chimneys was within months replaced with actual air conditioning units that were installed in the building. So, there are some things that are so obvious and so big that we look at that and go, yep, we learned we're not doing that again. But I think, throughout each of these projects, there are certainly things that we take and say, all right, well, maybe the concept is good and maybe it'll work somewhere, but it won't work everywhere. So, I don't know I don't know that we've done a real debrief to say, this is a yes, this is a no. But sometimes I would say, Margaret, these things come up years later. So, we may look at something that's a lot harder to maintain than anybody expected it to be. It may take 2 or 3 years to say, okay, we don't do that again. Does that make sense? So for us, it's a continuum. I mean, we're at a point in the continuum.
I understand that, and I'm sure that it's something that you're all trying to keep on top of, and whether it's tapping into the experience of other districts who are also doing facility replacement projects and buildings, but just to make every effort to try to avoid, or at least be aware of the pros and cons of certain kinds of innovative strategies, building and design strategies.
Oh, yes.
Right.
We're very much into that. And actually, that's where I'll be for the next couple of days, is at a conference discussing these very things with other district people around the state. I mean, it's something we're very engaged in. Right now, I feel like I'll happily call it the experiment of the Discovery Building is working with us as far as how it's impacted teaching and learning and sort of the use of the space, and many of the technical choices made to create that, I still feel like we can stand behind, but that doesn't mean we're going to do them everywhere. It works much better with the high school building and a large building that we're trying to squeeze everybody on campus. It's not stuff that we're going to do on the elementary. It's not even stuff we decided to do with exploration. We looked at it and asked the question, should we, like the raised floors, should we do the raised floors at exploration? And we really pulled away from that because of the type of building and the type of work that's happening in that room. So we're really trying to be adaptable and find the best solutions that are most resilient and most, for the long term for these buildings. But yeah, we are very much involved in that self-analysis ongoing.
Thank you, Carrie. And then it looks like Thomas has his hands up as well. Or is that a leftover, Thomas?
will just quickly, I'm glad to hear Carrie say that because I just sent him a note in chat.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's great to see what other public school districts are doing, but we do live in Santa Monica and we should be exploring best practices wherever they may be. They might be in the nonprofit world, they might be in the Catholic school world, they might be in the independent school world. And I think that's what our community wants, right? We want excellent public schools in all areas. So let's be open-minded. And, you know, I spent some time at the National University of Singapore. They don't say, oh, Asia's best or Europe's best or the US is best. They go find out what's best. So I'm glad to hear that. And I think that's the mentality we should have. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. And then I see that Sam raised his hand as well. Sam, are you?
Yeah, so I
Okay.
know Alan listed off a number of issues that are still outstanding. And so, and I know this was a point of contention, right, is, you know, it was taken to the board for sign off and approval of the project, but these are more than just punch list items. So, you know, what's the threshold by which you're, you know, going to the board and asking for approval of a project that still has some pretty significant contractor, subcontractor functionality items that are hindering the proper usage of the building?
So Sam, I think that in terms of proper use of the building, I mean, obviously we've been using the HVAC system since August last year. It's been going on for 7 months. We've actually had this thing operational, the swimming pool and all the rest of the things. I agree with you. Some of these things were fairly significant. We've also got to a point where I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, we've obviously got McCarthy has a whole bunch of subcontractors out there who have not, I mean, who've completed their work months and months and months ago. And, you know, there's obviously a release of, let's call it retention, money that's withheld against that as well. But I believe that, we took, certainly my view, and this is why I'd suggest we actually go ahead with it, is I think that we are, in fact, at that point where we are done. By the time when we went to the board, when we put together the agenda item, it obviously takes several weeks to be able to get an agenda item together. At that point, we actually thought we were going to, in fact, finish with those little bits and pieces. And some of them have dragged on a bit longer than we expected.
So I guess what creates that threshold for you guys? And I guess really pointing to you, Alan and Steve, in terms of, when you're holding, obviously, certainly retention on subs that have been done for 6, 9, 12 months even, right? That's reasonable. And in some ways it's hard to do these things with a breakout, but it sounds like we also have some subs that still haven't delivered on expectations. And, we also deal with warranties once things are officially accepted and all those types of things. So.
Yeah, so we Sam, we talk about retention because obviously in this line of work, that is typically what happens. Technically in a lease, so I'm going to say retention, but it's not actually retention. Technically in a leaseback agreement, there is no retention. Instead, there is a retained lease payment. It operates the same way as retention. It's the same percentage as retention, but according to the legislature, it is not actually retention. So take that as a caveat. And here's what I'm going to tell you. We've reduced retention by half. So, the contractor, we withhold 5% throughout construction. And then near at the end of construction, they can request that we reduce retention. Now on a $150 million job, you reduce retention by half, you still hold $7.5 million. So right. we do have that money in I don't want to say in the bank, because technically it's in escrow. We have control of that money. It doesn't get released until we say it can be released. So when we talk about accepting a project that's complete, there's a couple of triggers there. Let me restate that. There's one thing it doesn't trigger, which is releasing all of the money to the contractor. But there's a couple other things it does trigger, and one of those is recording the notice of completion. Now that notice of completion is it starts a clock. So they used to call it the 30, 60, 90-day clock. So for any contractor, any subcontractor or supplier, that has provided materials or labor on the job. Once we record a notice of completion, they have 30 days to file a claim. If they don't file a claim, they're time barred, so they won't have stop notice rights. They'll still have contractual rights and so forth, but they don't have stop notice rights. So it's an important trigger for the district to record that notice of completion to protect ourselves. I suppose it might protect the contractor as well, but that's from our perspective, that's secondary of that. I mean, our goal, of course, is protect the district. So that the recording of the notice of completion is typically triggered by completion of the project. I mean, it's built into the name, I guess. So if we don't record that, then they have 90 days from cessation of labor. So that would give an extension of time for subcontractors and suppliers to file a claim. And then if we record it late, and the longer we wait, it starts that 30 day. In other words, you can go 89 days and then record the notice of completion thinking that you're good to go, and you've reopened the door, you've restarted the clock. So for us, it's important to get that as close to actual completion as possible, knowing that we always have that retention, or in this case, retained lease payments withheld to protect the district. And if we, for example, have to go in and, I don't know, replace something that the contractor refuses, which won't happen here, but if we had to go in and replace something the contractor refuses to fix, we've got that retention to pull that money out of. Does that make sense? It was a super long answer. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly, this isn't my first rodeo, and I've built for many years. I just think that,
but there's a lot of people here, Sam, who don't. So I went way deeper.
No, I understand that, but so the cessation of labor for a sub that occurred 6 months ago is already that's gone. So
no. Cessation of labor is on the project, not per sub. So a sub is going to be, they're on the hook until they know that their money is going to be withheld until the end of the project, not the end of their work.
So, I mean, it depends on how your GC is paying out, but fine. Again, I think that when you're, I don't think it's strictly protecting the district. It's also an important piece of this puzzle. And again, the laundry list of things that Alan listed are more significant than punch list. So I appreciate the time frame that you're calling out as an important piece. Obviously, the building's been occupied since August. The fact that we're still trying to figure out things, 8 months later is obviously a concern, but again, that's oftentimes part of construction. So I just think that there's some pretty significant items that Alan called out as still being open. So that's kind of the piece there. And again, that is what it is. So it's already gone to the board. So
okay. Thank you, Sam. So I'm not seeing any other questions. I think, Alan, we would go on to exploration. We do have a video that I think Carrie wants to play about exploration. Carrie, would you prefer to do that now or after Alan gives us an update?
It's not the video, it's the presentation of the renderings and the changes we did in the VE process, but I'd like to do that after Alan does his presentation.
Thank you, my mistake.
So just to tell everybody where we are right now. All the demolition that was going to be done has been done, with the exception of the South Gym, and there's no intention of actually demolishing the South Gym until the project is complete. So, so from a demo point of view and installation of shoring and the bulk excavation for the project, in other words, to get it down to the basic start of the project, all of that work is actually 100% complete now. So we are ready to actually start construction. As far as the DSA is concerned and the design, so the plans were submitted to DSA in mid-May. And then we received back check back in November of last year. And then we went through a whole value engineering process, largely because there were huge jump material costs and things, but there were a bunch of different things. So we went through this engineering process. At the same time, we'd received back check comments back from DSA, but wanted to go to DSA with these value engineering at the same time. So that is all done, and the plans were resubmitted to DSA last Monday. We expect a fairly quick turnaround from here, from what DSA has actually told us. And it looks as though we should have approval by the second or third week of April. At that point, we'd be ready to actually start work. So the GMP is the other element of this thing. We've actually been negotiating the GMP based on the latest submittal that's just gone in. And we are in the process of, we completed that process. And so the award to McCarthy was made on also on the 3/22, in other words, last Tuesday. So we'll be ready to get going with that once we get DSA approval. One of the things we had done is we had done contract amendments to McCarthy's contract for long lead items, so that they could go ahead and actually procure materials, which did two things. One is it gave them opportunity to actually buy the raw materials, like, for example, structural steel. They could actually place their order and actually lock in the price. But the second thing was also to start them on the whole submittal process, so they could go to the engineering side of things and do all of their detailing and the type of work that they've actually got to get into place before you can actually even start fabrication. So we're able to get a lot of that stuff done, and that's actually in process right now. In general, we expect to start construction, real construction, in the middle of April, and anticipate a 24-month construction period for both buildings, the two buildings together, which basically means we finished by spring of 24. One of the other things we did do to try and give some of the, we've got a great big chunk of construction going on right slap bang in the middle of the campus. So we've managed to get a section of landscaping that we completed the work there, and we've actually got irrigation and landscaping installed. This is adjacent to the business building.
Do you have an image of that you can put up?
I do not, I'm afraid.
It's really nice. It's really nice. I'm just curious how you picked the line. Like, it's very narrow in one area, then it gets wider.
So John, the reason for the line where it is there's a pathway, and that's actually on the northern edge of that pathway that's going to go in. So all that landscaping is permanent landscaping, and then immediately to the south of that, that's where the new walkway is going to be.
Oh, it's really beautiful.
And we plan to they've started mowing it and getting it all taken care of, but the plan is to hand that over by the start of for use of the school by the time they come back after spring break.
And I don't know if everybody knows, but all those trees that they planted at the was it Growing Green, the nursery on campus, they are all planted there. They look really great.
Branching out.
Yeah.
Just incidentally, as far as the trees go, we've got new trees that will be coming in the next couple of weeks, where we'll be growing additional nursery trees that will be grown and installed on the rest on the construction site once it's ready for it, probably 18 months from now.
Thank you, Alan. Carrie, can you do me a favor? Can you allow me to share? I think I can do this from my phone. We'll see. Okay. Oh dear.
Did I make the right Steve Massetti a co-host?
But you did. You nailed that. But I'm going to struggle with this for a second here. Alan, why don't you go ahead on with the next part, and I will, in the meantime, try to do this.
I don't have a next part, Steve.
Okay. Carrie, why don't you go on with the next part?
I'll do the next part, but I'm going to share my screen while that happens. Okay.
Okay, and I have a question for you, Ellen, while we're waiting.
Yeah.
So now when you look out of the English building, there's kind of more of a hill there. Is that just because that's where they're storing the dirt? It's not going to be so high, right, across the street?
It's very definitely not going to be that high. And there's a lot of dirt that had to be stored. You know, it's very, very expensive to haul dirt off. And the last thing we want to do is haul it off and bring it back. So, so we've got a balanced site. And so we have got Mount Samo High there, which is only a temporary phenomena.
Mount Samo High, I like it.
Yeah.
I do have to say, I know that the views that are coming out of now the HC are very nice, going straight down. It's really pretty.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And you might notice where the pool building used to be, we have a nice pile of sand, but we were able to put in the stage, re-pour a lot of the concrete on the stage and get a big fence in for stairway for anybody who went to stairway.
Yeah, that worked really well. Well, is that there's still plan to still have graduation there? It's just like usual. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carrie,
We'll
do you
have
want me to,
graduation here.
Sorry. I think I can share it real quick if you want me to,
Okay,
just so
I'll stop
everybody can
sharing.
see that area. Sorry.
Okay. It's you.
Apparently I'm not oh, I got kicked out. Can you make me a co-host again? I'm so good at Zoom.
You're a co-host on both of the Steve Massetti's.
Thank you. So is this sharing? No.
Not yet.
Oh,
We see
no.
something
there it is.
now.
Okay. So this is the area that that Joan and Alan were talking about. And I think, Alan, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of southwestern edge is what you were talking about, where there will actually be a pathway, correct?
That's correct.
Will that be in before they open it up or later?
No, it'll come later, because you see that little switchback that's to the left of the that actually hooks up with that pathway that goes across.
Okay.
And there's still there's a fair amount of work that has to happen to complete that. So it's not going to happen right now. We thought it'd be much better just to be able to hand this over and.
So obviously they're moving the fence over.
Yeah, that fence is going to be moved to where that you can see that machine, that yellow machine is.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Great. Thank you, Carrie, for letting me share that.
Certainly. Yeah, certainly. I can't wait to get that part open. What's the thing we open up after that? Think we'll have something different by the time they come back, the kids come back in the summer?
So what's actually going to happen is in the summertime, we're doing a lot of work. We're picking up a lot of the utilities that end up at the top of what we call the barn and stairs. So there are a bunch of utilities that are stubbed out there. There's gas, there's electricity, there's fire, water, there's data. There's a whole lot of stuff there that's all stubbed out. All of that's going to get torn up next summer when school's out, and that whole area back to where the fence is now is going to be completed to its final state, basically. So that's really what's going to happen. There's obviously stuff that's going to happen on the construction site itself, but that's what's going to happen off-site, and then we won't have to go back there again afterwards.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. We did this presentation at the board meeting last week, but just wanted to talk about some of the value engineering work we've done and the sort of upgraded. Our architects made a point to say they're not renderings, but they're the actual drawings from the modeling that they've been doing.
The digital model.
The digital model. So just to sort of say that. So what it shows is, we did need to go in and, as prices have continued to rise, we did need to go in and do some significant value engineering, but also we were really listening to our user groups, particularly our PE and coaches, our PE teachers and our athletic coaches around the gym. So you can see just sort of here where it says we reduced a lot of the glass in the gymnasium, reduced some of the glass in the dance studio, adjusted, some fences, other things. You can see I'm not going to read everything for you, but we just moved a number of things to sort of, and the great thing was we were able to do a lot of the changes in value engineering without impacting program. So it's not impacting sort of the way it works, but just making it a cleaner, tighter, cheaper project in today's dollars. This gives you another view of the gym. This is on the Pico side, going down a little farther to the west. See sort of modified gates and louvers, reduce some of the glass in the gymnasium. You know, just some of the changes that we did there. But still retaining a lot of the character that the building, this is from looking at it from the northeast, and the exploration building is taken out, so you can actually see this building. The exploration would be here in the foreground.
What is the white, stone, or what is that? The
It's,
white concrete, or what is it? I mean,
Alan, go. You're muted, Alan. I can't hear you.
Joan, are you asking about the building itself?
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just trying to, what material that would, is it like
It's
Discovery?
Stucco, like Discovery.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the stucco with integrated color, like integral color, like exactly like that Discovery.
Okay.
And then inside the gymnasium, where we just adjusted the lights and we removed the suspended ceiling, but it still has a lot of the character. And there were a few safety items, the sort of walls and pads and places where in runoff areas the coaches felt we needed a little bit more safety areas. And this is from the auxiliary gym looking down. So we made this a solid wall as opposed to a glass wall. That was a recommendation. And then we also covered in this wall and put pads on the runoff area. And then some work on the exploration building. We still have the areas on top that can be used, but they're not as fully equipped on the east side as they are as on the west side. So we still get the use, but not as, we took a few things away. And we took a little, we made a little more planting areas and a little less concrete in this area between language and exploration. And the other side of exploration. Some of the vertical fins we adjusted as we adjusted the windows. And on a section. And a section of exploration. It always gets me how much elevation we deal with in this campus, you know, going from the low to the high, and all the buildings have to go sort of built into that. Yes, Amy.
I'm curious if the buildings will match a little bit better than maybe discovery and innovation.
I think they will certainly live in the same family, but will not be an identical match. But they'll live in the same family. I sort of like the conversation between discovery and innovation, but I do know what you mean, that they definitely don't feel the same. And I think these, partly because of the same designers, will feel a little bit more similar. But this is a different looking building than the last. Yes, somebody else raised their hand, but Margaret.
Yes, just a question. I did watch the board meeting on last week, and I just found it fascinating to see how much value engineering has gone on to bring the design down to a more cost-effective project, which raises the question to me as to why they were exploring more expensive design moves and materials and so on to begin with. It just suggests to me that time was lost with the with that first design phase. And I'm just wondering what kind of guidance and oversight the design team is getting from the district to sort of hold their feet to the fire to keep costs down. Maybe you could describe the process, but it seems to me that we've lost time in the process, and probably it's cost and even the expenditure for design services gets increased because of the time spent exploring these different design options.
Our enemy at this moment is the excessive rise in materials and escalation. So in the after the design development phase, both our architects and our contractors did estimates, and we think they were really strong, very good estimates. But they, the project came in over budget. So we made a number of changes, and there are things that are lost that we'd like to have, but we really kept the changes away from the program. After the construction drawings, as we went into DSA, we did another set of estimates, and the cost had gone up more. This was like everything we had built, everything we had planned, we had gotten right into the thing, and the cost went up more as we went into getting the GMP. So what it's not so much that we're seeing change. I would have actually, if we had our choice, we'd rather have the building that we designed initially. But, with cost going up rather substantially, I mean, steel and everything is just going through the roof, that we've had to keep cutting back and cutting back. I think we've made and honed in a better building, particularly with the continued input from the user groups. But it's part of the process is to try to get it tighter all the way along. I mean, we gave them a budget to design to, and then material cost blew out that budget. So we had to keep pulling it back to get it to fit. So here's some digital images. You can see sort of some, and we have new and old. So here's an old digital image of this front from Pico. The big change you'll see really is in the dance studio. But I do think in some ways it does simplify the building and make it a little bit better. Here's sort of exploration, new digital image from the north side. And from up over language, looking down. And up over the Greek, looking back. This is exploration. This was exploration before. Notice how much they love to take the admin out a little too soon. A lot of the fins. And then this is after. So we've just cleaned up. I think it's cleaned up the building quite a bit. Here's an image inside the gymnasium. This was the ceiling piece. It was very dramatic, and it would have been, I think, a nice addition. But and the windows were really big and large, but we sort of had to come back and sort of, so this is the newer look. And here's a similar image with a screen that drops down between the auxiliary and the new court. And then the old image and the newer image. Any questions about that before I close it out?
Oh, Carrie, could you just remind us of what the budget was, what the budget is? I just
Sure.
You want me to do that, Craig?
Yeah, Steve, go ahead.
Okay, so the overall budget for the project is 160 million. Now, initially, we had anticipated a little over 100 million, actually including demolition, abatement, and insurance. I think it was 108.8 million. We also had included $15 million contingency which, you know, it is reasonable at the beginning of a project when you're starting to design it to carry something like a 15% contingency. And then over time, you expect that to reduce. And generally the way that reduces is if the project cost goes up, you're reducing contingency by the same amount. And of course, if the project cost were to go down during design, you'd end up with a bunch of extra contingency and you'd say, okay, we need to reallocate this to something else. We've realized some cost savings, like the construction management contract came in $1 million below what we had carried as part of our budget. And there are a number of, you know, changes within the budget, but the overall construction cost, I'm sorry, let me say that differently. The construction contract cost with McCarthy will be 120 million. Now that has built into it some $5 million of project contingency. And that 120, including the 5 million contingency, is up from the 108.8 that we had originally had as the construction cost. With some of the other savings and with a reduction of contingency, the overall project budget of 160 million has maintained. In other words, it was 160 million when we first put the project budget together, and it's 160 million today. Does that answer your question, Judith?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you bet. Thank you.
I just would add, I think it must be really challenging to be building things these days.
It's a tough time. I mean, we got a report from a totally unrelated architect this morning that was, I think they got it from a meeting with DSA, and it showed, I think it was over a 16-month period. It showed, I want to say 8.4% annualized. So it must have been something like 14%, 13% escalation just during that time period. And that was the time period, you know, say it was something like April of 2019, no, April of 2020 through December of 21, something like that. But it also showed specifically, you know, Carrie mentioned structural steel earlier, or Alan did, I think. One of the things we ordered earlier, it showed that structural steel went up 111%. We saw things like copper going up 30%. Electrical equipment is another one where we did an early amendment, an early release amendment for the project, because the contractor said, look, I've been able to talk the supplier, this is a subcontractor saying, I've been able to talk the supplier into holding their price through the last 2 price increases, but they told me if I don't order by Friday or whatever the day was, the price is going up 25%. And it was a big dollar item. So we got the board to approve ordering the electrical switchgear early, and we were able to hold that price, because if we hadn't been, it would have been a multiple $100,000 impact to the budget. So we've tried to, you know, keep things on budget by doing things like that when we can. But Judith, you're correct. This is a really, really difficult time to be trying to budget a project or maintain a budget on a project that you're building or designing. But so far on this one, looks like we've been able to do it. I mean, I suppose time will tell, but at this point we're on track.
If I could just, I recall the architects talking about some of the value engineering. I don't know if Carrie touched on it tonight, but in terms of the hardscape, that they're reducing the amount of hardscape and adding more landscape and softscape, which of course seems like a vast improvement. So
it's honestly a better thing to do anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess my question, and I'll just leave it at that, is that in terms of sort of direction that the district gives to design team, that if there are certain sort of values such as reducing, you know, maximizing landscape, reducing hardscape, just a set of sort of goals and values as one approaches design, you may come up with a more cost-effective design. to begin with and not need, I understand the challenges of the supply chain and the inflation.
Yeah.
But absent that, just to have a slightly more sort of realistic and less extravagant design program to begin with.
Sure, and we're working obviously to improve those things, but you know, with the hardscape and landscape, I mean, one of the things to remember is that we've always had a big push for open space on these campuses, and it's not just meaning absence of building, but usable space, right? So hardscape for our campuses, well, for Samoa in particular, is often places that kids can sit, have lunch, hang out. If we're replacing that with a planter that has bushes and bark, we've lost that. We haven't lost the open space. It is still truly open, but we've lost the usability for our students on that. So there's always trade-offs. And I mean, it doesn't mean that we don't still have a good balance. I think we do, but there are always trade-offs and things like that. So, you know, maybe that the architect was focused more on, you know, usable space. At the same time, we don't really want a concrete, you know, just a flat, hot concrete area. We wanted to have some character, and certainly landscape is a character, maybe understating it, but anyway, certainly landscape is a critical element of that. So we're always trying to find that balance, and we don't always hit it right on the nose, but I think I think to your point, Margaret, the value engineering that was done here has brought about some improvements in that sense.
It seems that way.
And we individually will be using that, including our design managers, will be using that as we go forward and approaching the next project, saying, hey, you know, budget is one thing. We do need to be focused on that, but something that can help that budget as well as, you know, create a more beautiful space might be, in this case, might be increasing some of this landscape. So like I said, our individual members of the FIP department will continue to refine that as we go forward. So Joan, I'm admittedly looking at this on my phone, but I'm not seeing anybody else that has a comment. So it might be.
I don't either.
Okay. So then I think it might be time to move on to the design review subcommittee update, which, as I mentioned, will become its own standalone item going forward. And so Joan, I would turn this over to you, and maybe you can start the discussion with the subcommittee members, which I believe is Margaret, Alexis, and Ralph.
Did you all elect a subcommittee chair or anyone leading that group?
We haven't done that. I have some notes from the meeting. I could start off and just briefly describe what went on, and I'd be happy to, you know, to share those comments with Ralph and Alexis, if that's all right with them.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Go. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the subcommittee did meet I guess it was last week, the 18th of March. We met at the facilities office up on 4th Street, and present was Ralph, Alexis, myself, Carrie, Michael Burke, Barbara, Chiabelli, and Julian from the district. Jim Favaro was there with 2 of his design team, and then remotely was Paul Travis and John Locasio from the historic team. So it was a fairly intense and detailed discussion, focusing on the 2 campuses, McKinley, which we started with, and then Rogers. Jim did get into very detailed discussion about the first phase and, of course, the long-term master plan. I think it's fair to say that our discussion really focused on the design of the first building for the SMS project for McKinley, that focused particularly on character of the building and massing issues as it relates to the rest of the campus. And I think some very good feedback and discussion back and forth. Ralph, Alexis, do you want to add anything to that?
I would add that I felt very comfortable with McKinley. I think everything that we discussed in terms of scale was valid, but stuff that I felt like was going to be addressed during the design development phase. But overall, in terms of the amount of open space they were able to maintain, the character of the building in relationship to the existing building, I felt very comfortable with that one. I felt like maybe we left in a place with Will Rogers where additional exploration and understanding, just because we ran out of time, and the understanding of how the new historic districts are affecting the campus and the need to maybe build more onto the campus in order to maintain those, maybe needs a deeper discussion of how much they're going to put on that campus.
Yeah, I think a large difference, and I feel the same way. I think, you know, it was great to be able to sit there and have a more in-depth discussion and learn more about the process and what they've looked at. And that, you know, McKinley is something that will be paid attention to right now in the design development phase. And I think for Rogers, it was more from the historic fabric issue, understanding the site planning constraints and why buildings have been placed where they have, but really that the design work for the building at Rogers that's closest to the existing buildings isn't going to happen at this time because that project is not you know, part of the current grouping of projects. So, you know, that's something that will have to be looked at in more detail, you know, whenever that phase has the funding for it, that it can move ahead.
Yeah, and I think back to some of the comments that the sort of the broader design issues that we discussed for McKinley also related as well to Rogers, just in the sense of what the character of this proposed building is, which is kind of on, I guess it would say the sort of northeastern part of the campus, but how it issues of compatibility, of character, of what its presence is going to be on the campus. I think one of my frustrations, we did run out of time because it was a very interactive and I think very valuable discussion. One of my frustrations, and I'd love to have a little more clarification of that from Carrie, is how the historic consultants are going to be involved in this next phase of the design development, what sort of interaction there's going to be between the architectural team and the historic team. I think that this case is this HRG or ARG?
For those two, it's both HRG.
HRG. And then sort of to follow up on that, we did sort of run out of time, but we really didn't have a conversation about next steps and when the next meeting might be to review where things are going. So those are the two issues that I felt were sort of left hanging just by virtue of the fact of time constraints.
Okay, I think I can answer that. Though I'm sad, unless I look back at my calendar, a lot of those meetings blended together a little bit for me last week because we have so many of them. And John, I'm not going to remember his last name, but who is the architectural historic architect from HRG. He wasn't able to, what's that?
I think it's Locasio.
Yes, Locasio, thank you. He wasn't able to attend those meetings, the first two meetings in person. He had a medical thing that had kept him from it. But we did have him in person for a meeting on the JAMS project on Wednesday. And it really seemed to make a big difference having him present in the room, which is what our goal was going to be. So I know that Jim Favaro and his team are working on some things. We'd like to get them all back in the room again. And we'll see whether or not y'all are available, anytime over spring break, maybe in the second week of spring break to get y'all back in to a meeting with that. If not, we can do it the first week we're back. Because I'd really like to get all of those folks together in the same room again to take the same, take another swipe at it. I do know that Jim Favaro taken they're going to continue detailing what they learned in the process. And I think that's going to keep going as far as what we're doing for that development.
So just to summarize a little bit, one of the tasks of the subcommittee was to look at the master plans and the locations, particularly of these projects on campus, and kind of the future of how things are going to lay out, and just express a comfort that they're located where they need to be and they're the next project. So like we talked about Tetris at Will Rogers, I think it sounds like you've concluded that the placement of the building makes the most sense, and that there's no need to relook at that, right? Can I say that with regards to Rogers? It's more like design.
So. Ralph, you have some, I think, a pretty good understanding of.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say. I think that from a master plan viewpoint, where the buildings are is where they're gonna, at least the first phase where it's gonna be, this building could shift or not, based on its timing of, when it will be designed, and if there are demographic issues, programmatic changes that might come forward at that time. I don't know if that's a year from now or 5 or more years from now.
Yeah.
But there's no reason to slow down this movement forward into the design development process for Will Rogers or Ed.
I don't believe so. I don't know what Alexis and Margaret,
I think we're, given where we are and the need for, particularly for these two buildings on these two elementary school campuses, to start replacing some of those temporary classrooms. I think it's, the case is pretty strong. I think where we really haven't grappled, in a sense, even though Jim walked us through all of the options for where to place the additional buildings on the McKinley campus, which seemed to be a sort of an overwhelming number of new buildings and its impact on open space. But we talked about the use of the classrooms in the existing building, and how that would be essentially, because they're so, how should I put it, sort of under the standard that in terms of size that the ed specs call for. I was a little dismayed to learn that the continued use of, in the long term, the continued use of those those classrooms may not be for classes. They may be for auxiliary activities and special breakout kinds of uses. So I think in terms of the master plan, particularly for McKinley, don't know that I'm comfortable with that. We've really explored those issues.
But these next projects, the projects that are going into design development, are not.
That doesn't impact those. I mean, design development on the SMS projects, I think, needs to continue. But it was the kind of the long-term vision, particularly from McKinley, that I felt still has a tremendous, it places a tremendous burden on the campus for with additional construction.
When the first phase of the McKinley project creates a snowball effect, if you will, because that first phase eliminates parking. So that creates the challenges that then snowball into some of the other issues that have been called out previously around the McKinley master plan.
Right.
I mean,
right.
it certainly creates a need to replace parking in short order.
Right, which is then a snowball effect of some of the other pieces that are part of that master plan. So,
oh, if we stopped at the first phase, we would have sufficient parking. We will have, and once we take out the bungalows, we could replace the missing blacktop, you know, so it's not an issue of losing parking.
Right, there's a solution, but ultimately
well, the plan is
still
the plan is to move the parking, but it's not, but even if all we ever did was the first phase, we would have sufficient parking on that campus.
Okay.
I mean, that's one of our dictates on all of our projects, is that if we stop after the one phase that we have the money for, whatever we're designing, we still could go on forever. You know, it might not be the ideal, but
we'll be whole. I mean,
hamstring us.
Right. So that's the concept. And you see it at Samo High, we're going to see it at Malibu High. We would be whole. It wouldn't be optimal, but we would be whole at every campus if we stopped after any particular phase.
Right.
And to that point with McKinley, to keep that sense of wholeness and the fact that there is some flexibility and that the school function can continue and can thrive, that the continued use of the existing buildings in the historic district can occur for classroom purposes. Is that correct?
I mean, we can continue using those classrooms for forever. It's just they're not optimal.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Jim explained that when you make an older classroom of 960 square feet into a larger one, they get very thin and long, which really don't work very well as classrooms. He mentioned they could be used as maker spaces. So, I mean, the classrooms are still going to be used, but maybe for some other purpose, but no one's saying they're going to be taken away. The new classrooms will be 1,200 or more square feet to allow for more 21st century learning. So no one's implicating the destruction or removal of classrooms. It's just, we're going to make those rooms more suited for the space and size they are, which could be makerspace or libraries. And of course, we talked about the lower front, the old building becoming a large library, which would be great for that space. So, you know, all the old spaces are going to be retained, just probably more suited for non-classroom use.
But in the event that this is the only classroom, that this is the only new building that is built for the time being for the next few years, the original classroom buildings will continue to function as classrooms, or
they'll still be used as classrooms.
Yeah.
They will need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
So,
go ahead, Steve.
Oh no, I was going to ask you, John, if any of the other subcommittee members had anything to add.
No, I think it was a good report. I appreciate you guys having that meeting, and it helps us all feel like there's a deeper dive was taken into the questions we had. So I appreciate that. Anyone else have questions for the subcommittee members?
Michael, can you reach out to the 3 subcommittee members and kind of lay out the next steps, the next meeting that we'll have, so forth?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so then I think, Joan, if it's okay with you, that would take us out of project updates and discussion and into item 5, our discussion item on FDAC roles and responsibilities.
Yep.
Are we ready to do that?
Yeah.
So I think Carrie's going to lead us on that by reviewing the FDAC charges that were on the application.
So I've brought those up now. This is what was on your application, and this is what, you know, was on sort of what we've all agreed to that you're doing. I know there was some question about it. I never want to read these things for you. You all can read, but then just put them out there, and then let's see if we have any comments or questions, or if we want to make some additional clarification on any of these items. I'm checking to see. And Jen Smith, who is our board liaison, is here. Lori's not here, but Jen is, and because these come from the board. I know they came before Jen was on the board, but still they are a product of what the board has said is your charge.
Carrie, one area that I think it would be helpful for me to have some clarification on. I know that we're not the bond oversight committee, and that's another function altogether. But so much of what we're looking at here and what we're being asked to comment on and advise on does have, you know, the fiscal component. And I'm wondering if there is not a possible sort of a useful discussion to be had about how, whether there is or should be any interface between the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and the FDAC. For instance, I went back in the agendas on the Bond Oversight Committee, and I noticed the last meeting that related to Santa Monica was back in January. There were no minutes posted, so I couldn't really understand what the nature of the meeting was or the discussion, although I did see the agenda, which in some ways sometimes looks like ours in terms of the project updates. So I'm just wondering if there would be value in having the Bond Oversight Committee aware of our issues and our discussion, and vice versa.
I feel like y'all have very, very different responsibilities, and this is why we haven't ever mingled the two. The bond, you know, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee exists by law to make sure that we are following what the voters agreed to, and that we are not exceeding or, you know, in any way mishandling the funds or doing something outside of what the voters approved. That's their charge, but that's not yours.
Yeah, their job is to determine and report that the district is spending funding on correctly, or rather is correctly spending funding on what should be bond projects. They often try to step into your role and say, well, we think that, you know, we should, you know, and we'd like to review and tell you what we think about whatever the campus plan. That's not their job. That's your job. And so when they do try to overstep, we push back and we say, no, there is a totally separate and existing committee, and if you'd like to apply, we'll send you the application. But it's not your job to even have an opinion on what projects should happen first. Like, you know, with the grouping of projects. So this would have been late 2020 when we brought this committee the potential projects from the assessments. This committee decided the priorities. That is not the Bond Oversight Committee's role, and vice versa. Their job is to determine that the money is being spent correctly. It's not your role. So, you know, I think Carrie is correct. We've kind of kept a hard line between those because they have different purposes. I mean, Margaret, I think if members of the FDAC want to attend as members of the public at BOC meetings, certainly they could do that. And of course, vice versa. I mean, our meeting here is also a Brown Act meeting, and a member of the BOC could absolutely come here if they would prefer to, but I don't think we've seen that happen yet.
There was at one point, I served on City of Santa Monica Commission, the Landmarks Commission specifically, for a number of years. And there was a time, although the practice was withdrawn, that there would be representatives from different commissions sort of sitting in just as an ex officio role on sort of related commissions. Sometimes council members were assigned to different commissions, but it seems to me that there could be some value, particularly during this period where we're really reviewing and making decisions on, well, we're not making decisions, we're advising, I understand that, but providing value, what I think is valuable input to the board on, major capital projects. But it seems to me that there could be value in having a little more transparency or some interaction between the two, whether it's, as you say, attending meetings as a member of the public or as possibly just a member of the FDAC representing the FDAC for information purposes, vice versa. That's my.
I would say that if there was some cross connection, it might be more appropriate for the special education or visual and performing arts or the health and safety DACs to weigh in on some of the projects that you all are considering. But I think that it is more appropriate to keep this advisory committee very separate from the bond oversight committee. I think they have very, very different roles.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with what you were saying, Carrie, that some of these other committees, once in a while, if they were either to sit in here or during the subcommittee time, I think sometimes what we struggle with is when we have a question or if we maybe disagree with how space is being utilized, I think our only guiding principle to look at is the ed specs. And so if we disagree with something within the ed specs, it would be just nice, whether it's the Dr. Dradi once in a while, or somebody just kind of said to us, okay, this is kind of our philosophy of why, what we're trying to do here and what we wanted to do. So that way we could understand that in more detail when we're asked to take a vote or give an opinion.
Yeah, the cross connection there I would want to see would be with you and maybe some of the site committees, because the site
ed services, Carrie, we might want to bring in someone from ed services.
Yeah, ed services too also, but the site committees usually include principals, a couple of teachers, some parents, and they can speak more specifically around that school's sort of needs. But certainly ed services, we could bring those in. I mean, the ed specs was created deeply with ed services and the principals and the teachers. It's not as much as it's a document we rely on. It was really created with and for them.
Right, but I mean, I think to Alexis's point, if as a design review subcommittee is considering things and the only thing they have to refer to is this ed spec, but no context, like, okay, it says what it says, but why? I think we could bring a lot of context to that by either using site committee members, like you mentioned, or just Devon or somebody from ed services to pop in and say, oh, here's why that's important, because that can help maybe change the perspective, but also form the perspective of the design review subcommittee. So then when you're looking at the next issue, you don't need to ask. You're gonna say, I know why what we're looking for here. Not just why is it that way, but what are we actually trying to get to? We'll have to figure out how we can incorporate that, Carrie, but one way or another, whether it's the site committee members or just principals or ed services, we'll make that work. It looks like Sam has a question too.
And I do too.
Okay, thanks, Judith.
Judith, you okay if I go first?
Of course, Sam.
So as the person who I guess repeatedly flagged this, I guess I'm less concerned about input from other people or input on committees, and more so as I read this first sentence, right, is to provide the Board of Education. And I've been on this committee for years, and there are very few questions that come out of the Board of Education. There are members who sit here as members of this committee, and there's very few words that come out of it. And I think that part of the frustration from some committee members who have been here longer, some of whom have completely cycled off, others who are still here fighting the good fight, is that there's a feeling of rubber stamping. There's a feeling of certain things get ignored when they're raised. There's a feeling that staff is dictating certain things, and that messages are not being clearly heard or understood. And so the frustration in serving as an advisory committee to the Board of Education and the staff is that the Board of Education is that first entity there. And other than presentations that are made to the Board of Education by the staff, not by the committee, but by the staff, there's very little Board of Education input and impact. And so, you know, to your point, Carrie, we can all sit here and read, and there's lots of nuance and there's lots of gray in all of these pieces for sure. But I think that that is a continued level of frustration that exists among, and again, I'll only speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for other committee members, but it's an observation certainly on my end, but certainly an observation of others as well.
So I think, Sam, I mean, I hear you. And, you know, I think that our board members who serve as liaisons to this committee, and, you know, I mean, Ralph can probably speak to this as a committee member now, but they, I think, have tended to try to be deferential. Like, so they don't want to dictate or direct, and to some extent even participate in the conversations. I know there are times when it makes sense, and clearly they do, but they really want this committee to be able to do that work. And whether they acknowledge it verbally, I promise you that they hear you, because oftentimes.
So Steve, respectfully, again, you're a staff person talking to me. There's a member of the Board of Education sitting here. I flagged this as a Board of Education concern, and Jennifer's relatively new, but and again, I've been on plenty of these calls, plenty of these meetings in person prior to COVID. The Board of Education, I'm not asking them to take ownership. I think what we're asking for is questions and charges to be given by the Board of Education, respectfully. So again, I think that, to what I've said previously, there's clearly a staff directive that takes place, but this is an advisory committee to the Board of Education as well. Our committee chair does not present to the Board of Education in any sort of way. The committee, the presentation is all done by district staff. So again, I think that if the charge of the committee is supposed to be all of these things, that there needs to be a greater investment and understanding from the Board of Education, not a guidance of the meeting. And liaison is one piece of the puzzle, but if we're providing perspective and communication to the Board of Education, that doesn't exist currently. It's very limited.
So I would like to chime in. I appreciate your interest, and I am relatively new, and I have served on other. I do serve on other district advisory committee boards, and I thought that what this is presenting is the charges. Every DAC has charges, and they follow the charges, and then every DAC that I'm aware of has its district staff present to the board. So I'm not quite sure what alternative or what you're not seeing in terms of the functionality of the process.
Yeah, so I guess the Board of Education has asked maybe a handful of questions in 3 years here on these meetings. The Board of Education had something presented to them prior to this meeting that this committee requested to review in advance, and there was no response from the board. It was a response from the district staff. And it's a continual cycle. This committee has made recommendations for 3 years that have been ignored by the staff. And so again, the Board of Education is privy to this information, but doesn't seem to be interested in actually gathering this information as an advisory committee. An advisory committee is not just here to meet and take votes and then be incorporated into some minutes in a board meeting. If the Board of Education has members serving on that committee, they should be asking questions and understanding why things are being flagged, what alternatives are being suggested, what pieces are in place there. And so again, that may be that the Board of Education is not interested in that as an advisory committee, and that's all well and good, then that statement just needs to be made. But then it shouldn't be that we're an advisory committee to the Board of Education. We're an advisory committee to the district staff, who then present to the Board of Education on their findings.
Okay, I think that it's a little semantics, but okay, I get your point.
I don't think it's semantics. Those are two very different things. A Board of Education versus the district staff, those are two different sets of people. So, but go ahead, Judith.
I mean, just because I've been, the longest serving member, I believe, this group has gone through many changes. I think in years past, there was more interaction between our committee and the board at meetings. I mean, I recall it used to be that DACs gave, there were opportunities where the DAC, not the staff, but chairs of DACs would present to the board. And that has probably gone away. I don't, I used to attend board meetings, when I was much more active in schools, and also perhaps more in this committee, when I was closer to Samo High. But there were a lot of controversial issues in the past, where, and there were also very controversial ways that this committee was run back at the beginning, which, has evolved to something much better in terms of transparency. But we used to have more subcommittees. I remember being on a financial subcommittee, and, to Margaret's point, we had much more understanding we got into more details about contracts and how budgets were built. So I mean, I've seen an evolution of this committee, and as and just from my perspective of working in the city and seeing how city boards have worked, things change over time, and it depends. I think it depends. As you said, Sam, it depends on what the board really would like from the committee. And, I don't know if the board, I think periodically looks at the district advisory committees and the charges, and, if they want more information or not. I guess, I understand, because I've heard your frustrations over the past couple of years about, things that you asked for and then that you don't feel that, have been responded to. And so, perhaps, that's another discussion in terms of, from hearing, our discussion with staff about, things that you would like to see, and, maybe we can have an open discussion about, the points that really seem to be sticking for some people on the committee. I think this committee works pretty well. I used to challenge a lot of things in prior days, and I don't feel the need to do that anymore. So, that's my perspective. And so I don't know that I'm suggesting anything, but, I think I think we need to clear the air, because, I respect you a lot, Sam, and I've always thought you had a lot of added value to the committee. But I would, so I would not like to see you feel this continual frustration, and maybe we just have to have more of an open discussion about, the things that, if people want to see changes, what they are and whether that's possible or not. But that's all I'm going to say.
Joan, I think Ralph was the next that had a comment.
Ralph. Ralph, you're muted still.
I'm sorry, thank you. It's interesting looking at these, and some of it, certainly is history. DACs are advisory to the board. I mean, I think that's just the legal nature. It doesn't mean that they aren't, obviously they should be working closely with staff. Every DAC in the district, it's the chair of the DAC and the staff who set the agenda. DACs do write mid-year and end-of-year reports. So that is something that could occur. When I was on the board and coming to meetings, I would chime in when I felt it was appropriate. But board members sitting there are actually liaisons. They do not speak for the board, other than to state, what policy might be, what might be coming out of an agenda, but they can't give opinions that they think the board might have that the board hasn't, so stated. So I think there is some sort of difference, and to be honest, the board, and Jennifer can attest to that after it's been more, almost a year and a half. The board isn't going to come. That's the idea of having charges, and the charges should be reviewed on an annual basis. Other DACs do that. I think for me, I think some of the things on there aren't appropriate at this point in time. It could be problematic. So maybe the discussion should be moving forward is whether we feel we're best associated to do and to bring, because in June, every June, DACs are actually supposed to bring what they've accomplished for the year and what their charges they would like to see for the following year. And the board has a discussion about that, sometime over the summer, so that when school comes back in August, that the new charges are voted on. And so I think it's very hard because it's very broad. And so what is it it's most important for us to focus on? And I think I agree that, and I do think, there was a scarcity of meetings, and board members and staff know that I felt that way. It's never been, it hasn't been appropriate for a number of years. COVID certainly had something to play with that, but even before, and there should be meetings at least quarterly. And if it's to, for me, it's really to sort of look at what has been occurring and to make sure it's what's in the best interest of the district. And so I don't think it's our to analyze how a room is being used or this, is to ask questions about that, because every site has had good involvement of the principal and teachers and parents and architects. Now, we're beyond the standards phase, and that's supposed to be implemented. So they should be bringing us plans and thoughts on the future on these buildings that are in conformance, with what the board has approved, the standards, the ed spec, so to speak. And there's been an analysis and hearty discussion at every site as to how to apply those to each particular site by itself. And so we certainly should be, if we have questions about the decisions they've made, that's the place to get the answers. So that, we can report back to the board that we feel good or not about what has come to us. But I don't think we're not in the position to, I don't feel we're in the position to make those decisions, for the sites. And I think, the design committee that we have now is sort of a ad hoc committee. Standing committees are problematic because technically standing committees could be subject to the Brown Act, depending who you ask. Even though they're not a majority of students, if they're meeting on a regular basis, they could be considered Brown Act committees as opposed to an ad hoc committee, which is there to look at certain things over a period of time, and then they're not needed anymore. So what's, really going to be the role of that design committee? Anyway, those are, are just some thoughts, and that I'll just put out there. Thank you.
Could I just add one more thing, which is what I forgot, I meant to say, and then I got caught, went off on some other tangent. But I think that it would be the ed specs are something like I missed it. I've been on this committee, and I think that it would be really helpful because we have a lot of new members to review that. And I mean, I know there was a big process. I wasn't really involved in it at all. And so, and certainly the plans we're dealing with now and, in the future are based on that. And so I think that could be really helpful to for our committee to hear from, somebody about that. And to, I know that they're on the website and all, but it would be, I mean, because that's the basis of what we're doing these days. And so I suggest that would be really helpful to do in the near future.
So Judith, I think it's a good idea. I think our next meeting, we were planning on doing two things. One would be a tour of the JAMS Performing Arts Center, because I don't think you as a committee have been able to see that in its complete form yet, and it's worth seeing. And the other thing we were going to do was focus on these first round SMS projects that came out of the assessments and our current status on those. So we were planning to do that. I want to say, was it April 18th?
April 18th.
Okay, on April 18th, but perhaps at the following FDAC meeting, Judith. I like your idea of kind of a like a refresher maybe for the committee members, and maybe we can have our design managers put together, like a half-hour presentation, just to clearly the ed specs are a comprehensive document, and we're not going to go page by page, but perhaps they can put together kind of a high-level half-hour long presentation. Joan, if that works for you, and Judith, I think that would hopefully comply with what you're looking for.
Yes, thanks.
Okay,
it's a great idea.
Okay. And is the
just to say that
district,
I'd
are
really
we
like-
meeting? Is it, can we start to meet in person as a district?
Yeah.
well, we're certainly meeting in person on the 18th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think-
But to that review of the ed specs, I would also, I'll see if Dr. Mora and some of the principals and educators who helped create it would be able to attend that meeting, because I think that there'd be a great benefit in you hearing from them, where we came from. It's not, it wasn't us. It came out of their recommendations.
And we can talk about why. Why is this there?
Yeah, the big why.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the next meeting is April 18th. We'll plan on touring the JAMS auditorium complex. And anything else?
Could you remind us again of the dates on where there are going to be community meetings at Roosevelt and
Certainly, yeah. So
I think Lincoln.
Yeah, Lincoln and Roosevelt. Do a little preview on that. It's the 25th and the 26th of April. I don't remember which one's which. Esme, could you tell me which one's which one?
Yes, Lincoln's on the 25th and Roosevelt is the 26th, which is Monday and Tuesday.
Great, and that's Esme Cariaga, who is our communication specialist who works in our facilities office that does everything really great. She's made a lot of our videos and other things for us. Thank you, Esme. So that'll be from 4 to 6. And in some ways, we'll do a tour at each of these sites and they'll be in person. But the big difference is that we need some input from the community as to where to go and how to go forward. At Lincoln, we have a couple of different directions that we can go as we develop our campus plan. We don't have any SMS projects coming up right away there or anything that we have funded, but we really need more direction as to what comes up first. There's a lot of work to be done at Lincoln, and we sort of need to go sort of have a little guidance and direction. On the other, at Roosevelt, we have a real challenge in that the historic resources really considers most of that campus to be a historic resource. And the problem is it's a very small campus. So if we were to do everything we can do, so if we retain everything, then we lose our educational benefit, or we lose a lot of field and open, space. So the goal there is to give the community an option. Here's where do we sit, and here are some parameters. We have a campus plan that we developed which replaces most all of the buildings. We have another campus plan that saves all the historic buildings, and a couple in between, and a couple of processes how we get there. And we need the people to weigh in, what's important and what's really the vital importance to this campus. And so that's going to be what that community meeting will be about. And those will be on the 25th and the 26th from 4 to 6. Also, just to say, because Esme reminds me of it, is that by, I think, if not today, tomorrow, the presentations, the films, and the comments from all of our 5 previous meetings are now up online. So I think she was finishing up the last ones today or maybe tomorrow, but we'll have all of those ready to view. If you want to go back, if you didn't go, if you want to see them, good times, go experience. Thank you. Joan, you were waving.
Yeah, I just, while you were talking, I texted Amy Beeman-Sloan. She's the producer of Jams Theater Company. The 18th is the first day of Tech Week. I don't think it's a problem. They'll be in the auditorium doing tech for Annie, and we can see a show being put together. Okay. But it's just the first day, so I would think it's okay if we're not, but that will be going on in the theater.
Yeah, so we can be in the performance lab, and then we'll just pop in and see what it's like. That'll actually be fun to see what's going on.
Exactly. So.
I do have a question, Carrie, with regard to the challenges at Roosevelt and Lincoln. And they're different challenges, I know.
Oh, yeah.
And I do think there's great value in these community meetings that you've held at the 5 campuses. It's not the same thing as a more focused charrette where you actually sit with community members and really in a kind of interactive discussion format, really explore alternatives. And I think particularly with regard to Roosevelt, it's going to be critical that the process, the community input, be perhaps considered in a more structured way.
Yes.
I think the campus tour and so on, the way you structured the other ones was excellent, and the way you had little stations and the ability to really test or sample the various issues all along. But I think in terms of the more challenging campuses, that we need something that's a little more focused and purposeful, with the idea of coming up with something that or at least referring it back to the architectural team to sort of digest and come up with maybe 1 or 2 options that can be further refined. But it seems to me that that's going to be required.
Yeah, it's those 2 meetings are definitely going to be structured in a different way than the last 5, because we really need to seek more specific input. And so it will be much more of a charrette experience, and we'll do less touring and more really trying to get people to weigh in and comment and really understand what it is they might be weighing in on.
And I must say I appreciated Ralph's comment about the school site committees, and that seems to be a piece that at least I have not been exposed to on this committee as we look to commenting and advising on various plans. And so is there specifically at Lincoln and Roosevelt, is there a site committee that can be engaged for these next two community meetings?
Yeah, and we're trying to get those scheduled before we have the community meetings with the site committees. Meetings with the site committees.
Trying to get what scheduled? We've
already had a conversation with the site committee at Roosevelt, actually at Lincoln. We're trying to get one scheduled with the site committee at Roosevelt prior to.
Carrie, I think Margaret's question might have been a little different. I think Margaret was asking that we have the site committees be participatory in the community meetings.
Oh, they're very much encouraged to attend.
Well, yeah, but I think it really be billed as a sort of, not just attend, but really provide some structure and guidance for the meetings. That's all I'm saying, that they really be actively. I'm trying to be also mindful of people's time because, my goodness, we can have meetings upon meetings, but if there's some way of integrating the site committee with the community meetings on the 18th, I'm sorry, 25th and 26th, and structuring it sort of creatively that way, I think that would be beneficial all the way around.
Joan, I think we're wrapped with this. Actually, Kathy, if you can unmute, I didn't receive any public comments requests, did you?
I don't see anyone.
I didn't receive any.
Yeah, but they would have gone to me and Kathy. That's why I was asking.
Oh.
And then the other thing I need to point out is that this last
No,
portion
I
of the
didn't get
discussion.
any, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you,
Click the
Kathy.
Unmute.
Kathy, when we do the minutes, this last portion of the discussion was actually more about 4F than about 5. But I'll work with you on that.
Gotcha.
Okay, so Joan, back to you, but I think the last thing was, I think you've already set the future meeting and we've talked about the content of the second meeting in the future.
Yeah, sounds good. So I move to adjourn.
I move.
All right, thank you guys.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.